Hello, young scholars. My name is Catherine Lockmiller, and I am a health science librarian at the Phoenix Biomedical Campus in downtown Phoenix. So you might be wondering what it is that a librarian can help you with in terms of your research and in terms of solar energy. So my job is primarily to provide best access to critical sources for information. I help you find information that is relevant, accurate, and authoritative, but not only that, I also focus on helping you find and understand how that information functions, who makes that information, why they make it, and why it is that that matters. Information is really difficult to understand as a whole because we live in a world that is now flooded with information. The internet is built on the architecture of information. When you begin to think about your research as young scholars, you'll necessarily be forced to think about all of the different things that have been written about solar energy, and not only about solar energy, but about the determinants of health involved in solar energy, the way that legislation and policy affect our energy, how people consume it. All of these things are rife for both factual information as well as misinformation. So over the next few weeks, I'm going to work with you to help you understand how you can sift through all of that and make sense of it, and then finally how to synthesize it and use it to your benefit. So today I have a small lesson that I'm going to provide to give you an idea how this could work. One of the areas where I focus is online fact-checking. So you're probably very familiar with Googling something to find the answer. But are you familiar with all of the ins and outs of Google? Are you familiar with looking for information pertinent to the date that it was published, pertinent to the source that published it? Are you familiar with how to use the correct keywords to find correct information? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run you through a short search that involves something that is very special to me, coffee consumption. So only recently, it was found that there are correlations between coffee consumption and risk of cancer. So let's say, just for the benefit of our research today, that we vaguely remember seeing on Facebook two posts. One that said a daily coffee actually increases the risk of developing cancer. We saw another post that said a daily coffee decreases chances of getting cancer. So they can't be both right, can they? And since I really like coffee a lot, I like coffee a lot, then I feel like I should know if it's going to give me cancer. Because I don't think I like coffee enough to poison myself with it. I don't think so anyway. Alright, so how can we first find out if the information we found on Facebook is true? One thing we can do is we can Google it. So I have a Google search page open right here. So what we're going to do is we're going to search Google, and we're going to use the following keywords. Does coffee cause cancer? So this is called natural search language. What I did is I typed the question into Google search box. It returns a list of results. So these are called my results. You'll see that this search string delivers 70 million of them. In library language, we call that recall. That's a very high recall. So we see all of these different results. How do we know which ones are the best ones? Which ones are the most authoritative? How do we know which ones were published by organizations that do not necessarily have a stake one way or the other, but are authentically trying to find scientific answers to coffee and links with cancer? All right, so just for the sake of comparison, I'm also going to run a search string for coffee cancer. So you'll notice here that I actually cut out some words. The reason I did that is because Google actually doesn't even recognize all of the words that you search with. Google is more likely to recognize words that mean something. So the word does is a lot more abstract, which means that Google is going to Google's search algorithms are going to focus specifically on words like coffee and cancer. You'll see that these are actually very similar results. And in my in a brief run through that I did before this video, I found that these results were the same, just in different order. So now that we have them, we're going to look at this first page. Ask yourselves while looking at this, what are the sources available? We have cancer.org, The Conversation, Newsweek, Reuters, The New York Times, and WebMD. Do you recognize any of these sources? What do you know about them? You probably know that Newsweek and Reuters and the New York Times are all media organizations that all focus on research, that all focus on news. So you may not be certain what WebMD, The Conversation, and Cancer.org are. Some of you might know, though, that WebMD is an online information source dealing with medicine. WebMD is not highly accurate. It is published for profit, and it is not recommended in any circumstances when trying to find medical information. So we can almost exclusively cross it off our list. So that leaves us with news, which might be useful. We might find information relevant in the news. However, we also realize that news has the potential to consider entertainment value. News has the potential to be engaging and shocking, right? Do we really want something that's meant to shock us, or do we want something that's meant to give us the right information? So one thing you can do when you are fact-checking online resources is you can look at the end of a URL. So at the end of a link, you'll see words like com and org, and I think that's all on this page. Com stands for company, so .coms are the most common, and they are also the ones that are more likely to be associated with organizations that generate profit. You should try to look for words that end in URLs that end in .org, .edu, and .gov. So these pretty much all tell us that these are sources which come from either government-funded sites, nonprofits, or educational sites. In the case of .org and cancer.org specifically, we're looking at a nonprofit website. We also see that it was a website that was published very recently, on April 3rd, 2018. We should always keep this in mind when looking for information relevant to our needs. We do not want to find, especially dealing with sciences, we do not want to deal in information that is more than just a few years old. This isn't the newest paper on this page. However, it's new enough to suit our needs, especially considering where it comes from. All right, so let's go ahead and click on it. So we have a beautiful picture of coffee. It's very enticing. It could be rhetorically appealing, give us the sense that coffee isn't all that bad. That doesn't look like it's going to cause cancer anyways. So one thing we'll notice, as you open a website and you're searching for facts, try to look at the edges of websites. Do you see a lot of advertisements? If you see a lot of advertisements, it might not be that you're in the best research source possible. The other thing to look for are affiliates. In this case, the American Cancer Society is affiliated with cancer.org. The American Cancer Society is a highly renowned and authoritative nonprofit organization that compiles and provides funding for research into cancer and cancer prevention and interventions. You'll also see the author whose information we can click on. That's very important. You want to have an author who you can check, whose record you can check. We can actually go ahead and do that now. We'll see that Elizabeth Mendez is part of the ACS medical content and news staff. She focused specifically on medical content. That's highly important since that's what she's writing about in this situation. All right, so let's go back. And let's look in our first paragraph. That's a good place to look whenever you're looking for information at an initial glance. The first paragraph will tell you a lot. It'll tell you the thesis, the main theme of the paper, any arguments. So researchers have been investigating the links between coffee and cancer for decades, but there is still a lot they don't know. In 2016, an expert panel convened by the International Agency for Research on Cancer, the arm of the World Health Organization that is responsible for assessing whether certain substances cause cancer, could not conclude that drinking coffee is carcinogenic based on the current evidence available. This is very important. It tells us a few things. One, that in a very recent study of experts that were not only experts in their fields, but experts globally that were affiliated with one of the most well-known institutions combating healthcare disparities and disease, the World Health Organization. Not only that, the article also links to the actual panel, which we could click on. You always want to click on these links and see how far back they can take you. The best thing possible is to get to the original research. In this case, it looks like we're actually quite close, but drops from coffee from lists of possible carcinogens. Coffee has been downgraded. They give us a full breakdown, and then they actually tell us the publication source, the Lancet Oncology, which we could then go to find. We could request that through an academic database, and in your case, you could do that through ASU. Okay, let's go back to the original page. So the other thing we'll notice is that this is actually an interview. And this interview involves two researchers that both work for the American Cancer Society. Let me just say first, this means that they are biased. But we need to ask ourselves, is that bias a bad thing? They have a vested interest in finding cures for cancer. They also have a vested interest in finding out what causes cancer. This bias actually could be useful for us, though, because it means that they might be more likely to be skeptical about coffee. They might think that if coffee causes cancer, they need to find out about it. And since both of them are saying that coffee does not cause cancer, then we actually have more reason to listen to them. So one of them is Susan Gapster, and the other is Marjorie McCulloch. One is a PhD, and one is a Doctor of Science. We can actually click on their information, just as we did the original author, and we can learn about them. This is very important when fact-checking information online. All right, so this looks like it's a highly informative and accurate piece of information designed for consumers. But let's say we want to go beyond consumer research. What if we want to find scholarly research? I'm going to show you two resources really quickly that you can use when you start finding peer-reviewed articles. One of them is actually very similar to Google and is in fact made by Google. That is Google Scholar, which you can get to by simply typing into a URL bar scholar.google.com. So Google Scholar has a very similar layout to Google. You want to always make sure that you have articles checked unless you are looking for case law, of course. In this case, throughout this summer, you're going to be looking for articles. So once you search Google, once you open up the URL bar here, you might even see recent searches. So here's some of the searches I've been doing recently for some athletic trainers. And you can, in fact, build a search string. So what I did earlier was I typed in coffee cancer. But it's very important when using academic databases such as Google Scholar to use what are called Boolean operators. So the most common operators are the word and, as well as the word or, which we're not using in this case. And connects like concepts. When you add and to a search string, it's actually going to make the number of results that you get smaller. When you add or to a search string, it expands the number of results because it starts to look for synonyms. In this case, we don't want information only about coffee, nor do we want information only about cancer. We want information about both coffee and cancer. So we're including and in our search. All right, so let's go ahead and click on this. So the layout is quite a bit different than the normal Google search page. For one thing, you're going to see the source for information. This is very important. You'll see these odd URLs, which you may not be familiar with, and that's okay. NEJM is the New England Journal of Medicine. It's a highly credible source. NIH.gov is the National Institutes for Health. And you would learn these over time depending on the specialization and the field that you get into. So for now, we're going to look at these as well. We want to make sure that we have information that is new. Some of this is quite old, being published in the 1980s. Let's go ahead and make sure that we're only looking for information published since 2017. That's going to really limit the number of results we get to 16,900. Do we really need to include patents in this? Not really. All right, so now we have a list of resources dating back to the beginning of 2017 that deal with both coffee and cancer. So one thing that we want to be really careful to do is we want to find information that is the newest information, that it contains words like systematic review or clinical trial. Anything that involves, or meta-analysis right here. A meta-analysis is actually a huge conglomeration of all the research available on a certain topic. So let's go ahead and click on this. All right, so this is published in Health Psychology, highly credible journal, and then gives you an abstract, which you can then use to decide if you want to scan the paper or not. For now, I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to show you one other website where you can find scholarly information relating to coffee and cancer. That website is PubMed.gov. PubMed is established, organized, and kept up to date by the National Libraries of Medicine and the National Center for Bioinformatics. It's perhaps the most important health science database that you could access in the United States. PubMed links to 28 million citations. It includes unpublished manuscripts, and it also includes information as to where you can find further research. So PubMed is actually very large, and I'm not going to show you everything about it today. I'm just going to type in the search string that I use in Google Scholar, coffee and cancer. All right, so you'll see here we have a much smaller result list. That's actually quite helpful for us because it means we can work our way through it. 1,700 articles would take you roughly 2 or 3 days. It's really not that much information once you start to learn how to access it and learn how to read it in a way that is strategic. But what we can do is we can limit to systematic reviews, as I said earlier. So we're going to do that. We're going to use these filters on the side to help us better find and organize search results. So systematic reviews, as I said, systematic reviews and meta-analyses provide an exhaustive overlook of all of the information in a certain field of study. So this is a really important one right here. Coffee consumption is not associated with ovarian cancer risk. a dose-response meta-analysis of prospective cohort studies. We also see coffee drinking and the risk of endometrial cancer, an updated meta-analysis. You could work your way through these over time in order to find out what the general consensus is about coffee and cancer. But for now, it looks like we don't have to worry too much about an apparent link. All right, so now you have learned how to perform basic online fact-checking. You've learned about how to look through articles to find information as to authority and credibility. And you've also learned about 2 scholarly resources that you could make use of in the following weeks. Even PubMed will help you as you embark on a solar energy research journey, because solar energy deals directly with our health. As many of us know, our environment is directly related to how we feel, and being able to change our environment such that we feel better affects our health. So I'm going to look forward to working with you all and meeting you all in person in the coming weeks. I promise I'm a lot more fun than I am when I'm on a computer talking like this. I sound very rote right now. That's okay, I guess. Anyway, I hope you enjoy your summer, and I look forward to meeting you. Thank you.